Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. This is Ginny Jessica, and you're listening to Secure Insights, a series of conversation with industry experts, influencers, and leaders in the cybersecurity space. Today's episode is dedicated to education sector. We have the regional manager of College Technology Services from LA Community College District. He plans, coordinate, and manage the operational planning, execution, and evaluation of day-to-day end users' computing technology services with the Office of IT. Please welcome Kirk Yamamoto. Hi, Kirk. Glad to have you here in our podcast.
Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak on the subject.
Education sector is among the most targeted breach sector in US. Kirk, why do you think education sector is such a hot target for data breaches?
Well, Jeannie, the challenge that we have in the education sector is simply many legacy systems that are require patching and in some cases require replacement. So the attackers are going after attack vectors of the end of life, end of support systems that we have on many of the campuses. For the LA Community College District, we have 9 campuses spread throughout the Los Angeles area. And in many of these cases, we have heterogeneous environments on each one. In some cases, some very old systems, in some cases, very new systems, and we're trying to bring some homogeneity to reduce the attack surface, but still it's a continuing effort to try to reduce the attack surface for many of the security attackers that are out there in attacking the educational world.
Kirk, we want to know from the technical side that in what ways is education institutes targeted by cyber criminals? Like what technologies or the methods these cyber criminals are using to attack?
In my experience, what we're encountering, and I think it was accelerated because of the campus break during COVID from March 2020 through September 2021, is really identity impersonation, identity theft. And so we have a lot of user account compromise that we're dealing with. So many of the accounts that the students, faculty, people had left, they aren't active on campus. We had these hundreds of thousands of accounts that provided a way for attackers to basically compromise these accounts, start to send phishing messages within the Los Angeles Community College District, and then also start accessing systems and areas that they shouldn't have. And so that's been the main attack vector that we've seen for cyber criminals coming in. So we naturally have done a much better job recently with reducing the amount of account takeovers that we've had in the campus, but we still continue to be challenged with the evolving landscape of phishing attacks through email. So we still are working to improve our position in that space.
So, is email phishing the most common type of attack?
Yes, for us, that's the most common type of attack today. It's in terms of the overall security landscape, especially with many of the classes within our campuses being online, it is extraordinarily difficult to identify who's the legitimate person and who's not. Pre-COVID, it certainly was easier when we had we had people that had to show their proof of who they were. But as we've gone to more of an online modality for classes, it's certainly made it much more difficult to determine who's real and who's not.
The shift to remote work and remote learning has left a lot of room for cyber criminals to exploit new vulnerabilities. So, till what extent, Kirk, do you agree on this? And do you think that cybercrimes have only increased during COVID?
Most definitely. I wouldn't say it hasn't necessarily, it's always been kind of a constant flow in terms of the number of issues we're dealing with. But because of COVID, we're seeing a lot more devices come in from zero trust networks, zero trust spaces, because we're allowing both faculty and students to provide online classes, maybe with non-work computers, and so it's very difficult to tell what's, again, within our camp, within our network environment. Yeah, we could tell when an attack is occurring, or we get notifications, but when they're completely outside, because of COVID and the way that we were teaching and taking classes, it certainly changed the attack landscape from the higher education perspective.
Just how we have HIPAA compliance in healthcare sector, what are the regulatory compliances that education sector needs to abide by?
So while we have bookstores where we can do it, and business offices, as well as in some cases, cafeterias on the campuses that have to comply with payment card industry compliance in that space, the main compliancy that we have to deal with is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or the acronym is FERPA. So basically, it's a law that affords parents the right to have access to the children's records, but it also protects their rights in regards to personal identifiable information in education. So that's the main compliancy that our security office really stresses to all the teams.
Kirk, it is a very common practice for education organizations to operate within very strict annual budget. Does this strict budget stops institutes from investing in a proper cybersecurity framework?
Well, we are trying to adopt as much as we can, a security framework, but you're absolutely right. As the landscapes have shifted from more of worrying about the security of the campuses while students and faculty are on campus. We've now shifted more to this online mode. And do we have endpoint detection and response tools that we budgeted for all these devices that are in a zero trust environment? The answer is no, we really haven't. And so we continue to try to shift our budget to accommodate those type of needs. And it's probably going to mean migrating and retooling in regards to how we currently operate. So it's definitely going to be a challenge to keep what we have internally, but yet still continue to evolve the ever evolving landscape of end user compute, and how we're providing both classes in these different modalities.
So, do you think there is lack of awareness in this sector?
I don't believe so. In the Verizon data breach incident report, it illustrates the number of issues that are occurring in education around data breaches and just the amount of attacks that we're receiving. So there is, I think, plenty of visibility in the space. However, it's also the fact that we really shifted the way that we operate during COVID. And we continue to evolve how we provide education. And because of that, it may be, we may be having online classes for a long period of time. We may be doing hybrid classes for a long period of time. And because of that, we may end up with a new architecture that we will have to plan to secure. And so that's it's been many of the within the California community college system, we do talk to each other, and we're all facing the same challenges with reduced enrollment, but also the changing landscape of how we're providing education.
On average, students on campus are connecting their personal devices like smartphones, laptops, or tablets to campus Wi Fi daily. So, in this situation, endpoint protection platform solution will become far more desirable and essential for managing the institution's security.
I think that's a great question. For us, endpoint protection is really the first line of defense. So it plays a very, very important role for us. It is going to tell us what, when a device has an issue. However, with that said, many of the endpoint detection and response tools are agent-based. And with that said, also we do have licensing limits relative to per device or per user. And so, as you know, many students or just even IT professionals like us have multiple devices, and so in many cases, it's not just how important endpoint protection is, but also how can we deploy endpoint protection and in an area of zero trust, but also in areas that maybe these are devices that we don't necessarily own, like bring your own device, your own personal smartphone, your own personal laptop. Are we doing anything from the endpoint perspective to, basically do some type of scanning to determine that this particular OS, Mac OS, or Windows is a supported version? So, certainly we could be a little more sophisticated in that space, but it's one of those areas that we're still continuing to evolve and continuing to pivot because it's an area right now that's constrained by the lack of funds to pivot from what we have for endpoint protection on campus to all these other explosion of devices that are out there.
Building a proper cybersecurity culture is a very important thing for any organization, be it any sector, be it healthcare, education, finance, anything. So, Kirk, what tips would you suggest to education sector for securing themselves from breaches?
Well, for us, I believe the best ways are the organization like SANS, and also your vendor community, your security vendor community in the space that is more than willing to partner and help with trying to combat these spaces. But also for information technology and security professionals, I feel fortunate that in the Los Angeles area, we have a lot of groups that meet regularly, and they're always available if you want to meet in person and participate, like the ISACA in Los Angeles, ISSA in Los Angeles, and the online web applications security professionals, OWASP, meet regularly. But that's more on the security practitioner side. But on the side of how we're trying to educate our end users, the tools that we use come from SANS.
Right. It is time to make ourselves and everyone aware of these attacks so that we can defend against them. So, we have come to an end, Thank you, Kirk, for taking out time and educating us on why cybersecurity is important for the sector. And also, thank you, audience, for tuning in to our podcast. We will meet again soon, but till then, thank you and stay safe.